In June, the National Weather Service named Ken Graham as their 17th director, and we've already heard from him about his transition into that role. But tonight we are going to learn more about the present and future of the organization. So first of all, Ken, thanks again for being here. So what do you think so far in this short-term time that you've been in this role is the most challenging things facing the Weather Service?
I think there's a few things, right? We went through this pandemic, and you had COVID, and coming out of that, it's taking care of people. I mean, people went through the pandemic. We've had a lot of risk. We've had a lot of weather. We've had a lot of fire. We've had a lot of flood. So there was a busy period of time during a pandemic. So one of the biggest priorities I have to have is our people. There's so much passion. So how do I, as director, be able to focus that passion, be able to look at the workforce and make sure we develop the workforce of the future, and some of that's going to involve flexibility. Right? How do we kept forecast offices stayed at the office through the whole pandemic, right? How do we build some flexibilities? The next generation of employees would like to have more flexibilities in the workplace, and that's fine, right? That's fine. So how do we build that? So one of the big challenges is looking at our people. How do we increase the diversity? That's a verb. Can't snap your fingers and make our agency more diverse. So how do we go out and get that? How do we recruit? But more importantly, how do we build an environment that retains? How do we keep people there? So we're having those conversations. We're talking about not just conversations, but acting on it. So we've got teams put together looking at all that. So what's one of the big challenges? Here's the next: infrastructure. I mean, and everybody keeps talking about the infrastructure part. How do you keep up with technology? How do you keep things running? Everybody's moving to the cloud type of thing. What does that mean, right? When I went to school, it was a cumulonimbus, right? It was a cirrus. So that's not what we're talking about. So talk about the computers here. So we're talking about not just our systems now, but what's the next system? How's it more accessible to the weather enterprise, universities? How can we all be in a place that we can look at model data, improve model data? How do you have access to all that data? So the other part's the infrastructure. So it's getting the warnings out quickly. You want to get that done quick. So we're looking at that. The future. That's the third pillar that I'm really looking at. So it's the people, the infrastructure, and the future. What's the next radar, right? What's the next infrastructure? We're talking about we're tied to the desk, right? They're all, you got wires, you got everything going on. How do we build an architecture that's more mobile? How do you take whatever you have at the office, bring it with you to Emergency Operations Center? How do you bring it to the front lines of a fire, like our incident meteorologists do, the IMETs? They're on the front lines. We're giving them mobile tools. We're giving them tools we're calling ABLIS in the cloud. Our main system, we're going to build it in the cloud now through the next 5 or 6 years so we could be mobile. So that's one of the big challenges. It's no longer a society where you're just sitting in one spot, right? You got to be out there. You got to be getting the job done, and that's what we're trying to do. More mobile, accessible to everybody, and those are the challenges. Those are the ones that are my priorities.
All right. So switching gears a little bit, when you're making decisions at the National Weather Service, how much of an influence now does climate change play?
Oh, absolutely. We talk about that all the time. So you think about, and it's not just climate change, right? So we're talking about climate change. You're talking about longer heat waves, right? More intense. You talk about nighttime temperatures being higher. So there's no recovery. So you have a situation that the health part of this, right? The health part of it, bringing health agencies more into what we do. You're talking about heavier rain, right? Rainfall rates. So that's the climate change part, really seeing that on the ground. Sea level rise, right? Seeing those coastal impacts, more storm surge, more floods on a sunny day, but the wind's in the wrong direction, that type of stuff. So absolutely, but that's only part of it. We have to figure out ways to say, well, there's the science part, there's the communication part, there's risk. The risk is increasing, right? It could be fires. We had a fire season, now it's year long, right? All these things are changing. More people are at risk. So there's a whole social science and psychological part of it's never happened before. So how do you communicate something to somebody that's going to take action if it's never happened before? Because as a human, you compare every event to the last one, your previous experience. That's what always happens. So there's a whole new arena that we got to get more involved with the social science and behavioral sciences. So we talk about it all the time, partly from a science standpoint, but the other part as a communication standpoint. Part of it is increasing risk and how do you communicate that risk. We're having a lot of those conversations.
So speaking of communication, the Weather Service has made an extreme effort now to announce their watches and warnings in Spanish as well as English.
Yep.
So what other type of efforts are underway to improve accessibility to underrepresented communities?
Yeah, we have so much more work to do with this, and it begins from looking at languages. It looks at Spanish. We've translated hurricane products manually, so we have a huge effort right now. I'm excited about this. We have a huge effort to get our systems to be able to translate that instantly into Spanish, but not just Spanish, but other languages as well, right? To make sure we're inclusive of the people that need information. Remember, with climate change, remember this risk, it doesn't impact people equally. There's an inequitability on who's impacted most by these events. You talk about urban areas, you talk about urban heat island, 15 to 20 degrees warmer in the urban areas. And at nighttime temperatures don't recover. So you think about how we're able to do that. This whole, being a weather-ready nation, being a climate-ready nation, all these efforts really are pointed towards this equitability, right? If you don't handle that, you never become a weather-ready nation or a climate-ready nation. We have to be able to look at most vulnerable. So it's that part of it, but the other big part too is ahead of the storm. Our training, our outreach, we have to get into these communities and be able to speak about these things, the safety part of these things, get to the, you think about, churches. How do people get information? Get to those areas where people get information. I think there's a huge area that we need to improve on there.
Okay, now we have about 30 seconds left. The National Weather Service has many partnerships across the board. Do you hope to have to add any new ones to the list that you already have?
Here we go. In my 18 seconds, I get the big elevator speech, right? I love it. Hey, this is the deal. We got increasing risk, more people at risk. Things are getting worse. More people get impacted. No way can we do it alone. We need to be the ambassadors. We all need to be together. There's no way we can get there without being together.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. We really, really appreciate it. And congratulations on your new role as Director of the National Weather Service. This was Ken Graham. We appreciate his visit, and we will be back in a moment with more.